This will be long, so sorry in advance. I, 23F, live alone in a decently nice apartment in a nice neighborhood for 2 years now. For the most part, the mail gets delivered to the mailboxes at the front entrance of the building. Occasionally, packages are delivered straight to apartment doors, and it's pretty convenient. Well, about a year ago, I was home from work during the day BC. I took the afternoon off to go to a doc appointment. The doorbell rang, and I have a Ring camera. I saw it was the mailman, so I answered. I have this whole exchange on video. He was maybe in his 30s, white, short, like 5'5"-ish, very large glasses, really disheveled thin hair. I opened the door, smiled, and said thanks so much and went to take the package. He stopped and stared at me like something was wrong, so I was like, "Oh, sorry, did you need to take a picture of the delivery or something?" And to my surprise, he said, "I know you. I've seen you before, and you can see on the camera my face changes. My body demeanor gets uncomfortable, and I move behind the door." I said, "I'm sorry, I don't think we've met." I went to shut the door, but he raises his voice and takes a step forward and said, "I've seen your name on your mail. I found you on Instagram." My face went white and I froze. I said, "Me?" I was kind of like a deer in headlights. He said, "Yeah, you are a person of interest on Instagram for me. Your account was private, but you're pretty." I said, "Thanks," and slammed the door, locking it quickly. I was happy to know I caught the whole thing on video. I showed it to my then boyfriend, who agreed it was weird. A few days later, on Saturday, he's back at my door. He rang the bell about 10 times, waiting a few minutes, just staring. I answered him through the doorbell and said, "Hi, you can just leave any mail, thanks." What he said next made me shake. He said,
"I actually don't have any mail for you today. I just wanted to say hi. Can I come in for a glass of water?"
I decided to just not answer. To be honest, I didn't know what to say. But then, about 2 weeks go by. My then boyfriend stayed the night and slept in. I left early for work. I get a call around 10:30 from my BF. I won't believe what just happened, and to check the camera. I do. The mailman came. He rang the bell a few times and my BF answered the door. The mailman took a step back, and my BF stood for a moment, and they stared at each other. He realized the mailman didn't have anything in his hands. He said, "Can I help you?" And the mailman said,
"Where's the small girl who lives here?"
I'm pretty petite. I'm slightly under 5 feet, 100 pounds. My BF was stunned and said, "I live here too. From now on, leave our packages downstairs," and slam the door. I was really happy he said that because truthfully, he didn't live with me full time. It seemed to work. I didn't see the mailman again at all, actually. My then BF and I broke up a few months ago. I completely forgot about the mailman until today. I was entering my building where he was exiting at the same time I was entering. He stared at me and I went to walk by. He turned to walk after me and said,
"Hey, I haven't seen that guy in a while who used to live with you. Did he move out?"
I panicked and walked faster, grabbing my keys, but I lied and said, "Oh, he's around." And as I entered quickly, I said, "Hey, honey, I'm home," and slammed it fast. I don't know why I lied, but something told me to make it clear I wasn't alone. Am I being dramatic or mean, or is he creepy? Update. I took everyone's advice, thank you all so much. I decided to reach out to the super of my apartment and explain the situation and show him the videos. He said he will implement a new policy that male personnel are not permitted to walk around the complex. Simply go to the designated mailroom and leave. I also got large men's work boots and set them up outside my door. Hello, I'm writing on Reddit for the first time to share something that happened to me a while ago. I've been a student in Toulouse for 3 years now. This happened during my first year. Unlike many, I don't live in student housing, but in an apartment my father rented. It all started one day when I was coming home from the supermarket, the one in Compans Caffarelli, when I passed a blonde man around 40 years old, 1.8 meters tall. He was wearing completely worn-out work boots that left marks on the ground. This detail will be important later. I noticed him simply because he was looking at me very strangely, as if he were judging me. I ignored it and went home. From then on, I ran into him every time I went grocery shopping. Seriously, every single time. He was always there. looking at me the same way. But up until then, I didn't really think much of it. To me, he was just a weird guy. Where it started to become a problem was when leaving university, he was there. Sitting near the entrance, I often wore a university sweater, so maybe that's why he was sitting there. Clearly, I felt very uncomfortable, especially since he seemed to be looking for someone. I ignored him and continued on my way home. Now comes the moment of the incident. It must have been 10 p.m. when I started making myself something to eat. Then I went to take out the trash. When I got to the ground floor, I saw boot prints. I think you can guess who they were. I hurried, then went home very quickly and went to bed. In the middle of the night, I awoke with a start. I don't know what made me go look through the peephole in my door, but being very paranoid by nature and having a bad feeling, I went, and there he was, the guy, in front of my door, sitting against the wall, seemingly asleep. My heart started pounding. I froze, my eye glued to the peephole, unable to move. After a few seconds, he stirred slightly, then slowly sat up. He wasn't asleep. He stood up, positioned himself directly in front of my door, and remained perfectly still. I think he heard me approach. Then, without warning, he placed his hand on the handle and tried to pull it down. It didn't budge. He tried again, harder. Still nothing. At that moment, I didn't dare breathe. I felt like he knew I was there, right behind the door. He then pressed his ear against the wood, as if trying to hear the slightest sound coming from inside. I was terrified. He took a step back, then gave the door a light knock. Not hard enough to alert the neighbors, but enough to make me jump. Then he murmured something I couldn't understand. He tried to open the door again, then tried the doorbell, once. Twice, I obviously didn't answer. Then suddenly, he looked up at the peephole and smiled as if he knew I was there. His smile chilled me to the bone, especially since his teeth were completely black. After a few seconds, he finally walked away down the hallway into the darkness. I didn't sleep a wink that night. The next morning when I left my house, I found new boot prints right in front of my door. But the strangest thing is that I never saw them again. Not in front of the supermarket, not in front of the university. Never. Honestly, I don't know if I should have called the police or even a friend because he didn't really go through with it, but still. I've since moved apartments and even neighborhoods, and I hope I never cross paths with him again. I've never actually posted this story anywhere and haven't told it to many folks. This really rattled me as a kid. I was about 10 when this happened. I'm 27 now, but I still have nightmares about this. When I was little, every few years my family would go back to my mom's hometown, and we'd camp there for about a week or so during the summer, when I was on summer break. And this place, Edgewood, is a pretty small town. It has a population of 200 to 250 people, give or take, last I checked anyway, and was in a very rural part of the province surrounded by forests, and rather out of the way with a close-knit community of people who all knew each other. My mom and stepdad and my 3-year-old sister stayed at our family friend's house to visit, but as soon as I sat down, my mom told me to take the dog for a walk, and gave me a $5 to take with me to the convenience store along the way so that I could get an ice cream or a drink, which I was thrilled with, so off I went. The walk to the store was pretty uneventful. The town is incredibly small, and practically everything was within walking distance. The convenience store was about a 5-minute walk away, so I didn't have a hard time finding my way there. Once I bought my Pepsi, I went ahead and sat outside in the front of the store in the shade, taking a moment to sip at my drink before heading back to the house. That's when a blue car pulled up. I wasn't in the area often, so I didn't recognize anybody I met beyond the few family friends my mom would take us to visit every time we were in town. The person in the car rolled down their window and looked over at me, offering a smile and a wave. She looked rather unkempt and appeared to be in what I could only assume was her mid-50s. She was dirty, her hair was messy, and her car was covered in rusty spots with cracked and damaged windows. I glanced up, offered a polite smile, and went back to my drink. It wasn't uncommon for people to be friendly in that community, so I didn't think anything of it for the most part. She called out to me,
"Hey there. What's your name?
I looked up again, a bit hesitant to say anything. I was a bit shy around new folks. Kayla, I answered, not saying much else. I did get taught about stranger danger, but given that this town was a very small, tight-knit community, it didn't cross my mind at the time. I assumed I was safe.
Well, Kayla, I've got this makeup here, and you can have it if you want. I think you'd look beautiful with this makeup. Do you want to come and try it on? I can help you put it on.
That was what made the first siren go off in my head. I shook my head, telling her, no, that's okay. I don't wear makeup. I was literally 10 and was pretty tomboyish. I never had an interest in makeup, and from a stranger, even less so. I was getting uncomfortable and getting up to leave. As she was insistent on getting me to at least give it a try, I kept saying no and proceeded to start walking away when she offered something else.
Well, what about a muffin? I've got these muffins that are too good to keep to myself. I've got a bunch in the back if you want to come and take one.
That was Siren 2. I knew 2 things about walking around by myself anywhere. 1. Don't ever take food or candy from strangers. 2. Don't ever get into a van, a car, or a truck. Any vehicle with someone I didn't know. I said no again and explained that my family was waiting for me. She looked annoyed at this point and insisted again.
Well, I can drive you back, but you just need to get in the car.
She was snapping at me at this point, and I was reasonably rattled. I didn't say anything else and instead hurried off with my dog, hastily enough to where I forgot to even take my Pepsi with me. I don't know why, but something in my head told me to not lead the woman to the house my family was at. So instead, I walked off to the campsite, which was about another 5 minutes away. I figured she wouldn't have any reason to follow me to a campsite that likely had other people there, in case she wanted to try anything. But of course, here's where I was wrong. The campsite was particularly empty that day, and it's not really monitored by anybody. So this was probably the dumbest idea I could have had. I walked along the path that led to the road full of campsite lots, and sure enough, one glance behind me sent chills down my spine, and my stomach sank. The woman was following me in her car. She was a good 10 to 15 meters away, but was keeping pace with me like she was waiting for me to stop. I panicked, picked up my dog, and walked a bit faster down the road to see if I could get anybody's attention and ask for help. In my panic, I found one man who was setting up his campsite, and I ran to him as fast as I could. I desperately tried to explain what was happening. I was on the verge of tears, explaining that someone who tried to get me into their car was following me. He hummed and eventually said,
Sorry, I've got my dog with me. I can't leave her here for long. I hope you find your way back.
And left me on my own. Tears streamed down my face as I begged him one more time, but it didn't change his answer. I looked behind me and noticed that the blue car was gone. I thought that maybe she gave up, or didn't want to be seen. But either way, I took this opportunity to sprint away again, desperately looking for somewhere that would let me sneak back to the house off of the main campsite road. Off the side of the road, there was a very thick array of bushes. I picked up my dog once again and ran off into the brush until I was far away enough and hidden enough from the road. I held my dog tight and patiently waited to see if the car would drive by, watching through the bushes. A few minutes passed, and sure enough, there she was, driving by again slowly, almost like she was looking for something. Once she drove off, I wanted to make a break for it, but something told me to stay right where I was. Another few minutes passed by, and the car was back. She had looped around, driving agonizingly slowly. And that wasn't the first time she looped around. She did this more times than I can even recall. I stopped counting at some point. At the final loop, I saw her park her car down the road a good 40-ish meters behind where I was hiding. As she got out and started walking down the road, and again like she was looking for something, I was practically petrified. I laid there for God knows how long, waiting as she walked down the road. Eventually, I heard her mumble something and swear at the end of the sentence before she walked back up to her car. She hit the hood of her car before getting back in and speeding off. I waited another half hour, give or take, before I finally plucked up the courage to grab my dog and run as fast as I could back to the house. By the time I had gotten there, my legs were shaking and I could barely stand. My lungs were on fire and I was on the verge of tears again. My mom came out and scolded me for taking so long, asking me why I was gone for as long as I was. I broke out in tears, explaining to her what exactly happened and how I was followed and looked for at least an hour. She shrugged and explained that.
Nobody here would do anything like that.
And went back inside. Our family friend James pulled me aside and asked me to describe the woman and the car. He said,
"We know a lot of people here in town. I might know who you're talking about."
I told him everything I saw, and he hummed, glancing up while he pondered what he could recall about people he knew in town.
"Yeah, I don't know anybody with a car like that here in town. I'll ask around and see if anybody else knows who you're talking about."
The rest of the evening was pretty uneventful, but I stayed inside and refused to leave the house. James eventually pulled my mom aside to talk to her again, but I didn't hear their conversation. The rest of the trip was pretty uneventful, but for the remainder of our time in town, I wasn't allowed to go anywhere without my mom or my stepdad. And any time I had to take the dog for a walk, one of them always came with me. I don't think I was ever alone again during that trip, excluding when I needed to use the washroom. Whatever James told my mom, I want to say that it got her to take me seriously. I don't think anybody knew who that woman was, but honestly I'd rather not find out. We are in France. It is December 31st, 2023, and the party is in full swing. To give you a bit of background about me, I am a young woman, and at that time I have just turned 24 years old. I was born on December 12th. I am very happy because I am with my friends, partying in the suburbs of Paris. We're having fun, drinking, dancing, laughing, celebrating the new year. Nothing unusual, really. Around 7 a.m., I start to feel a little tired, so I tell myself I'm going to head home soon. I open the Bolt app, which I was using a lot at the time because it often had better deals than Uber. My ride is accepted. I tell my friend that I'm about to leave, and she suggests that I stay a bit longer since she's also going to leave soon, but would like to stay just a little more. Since we live in the same area of the city north of Paris, I accept her suggestion and cancel my ride. Then I realize that she actually wants to stay a bit more than just a little, and I really want to go home. So I change my mind and immediately order another ride. Once again, my ride is accepted. I say goodbye to everyone, and since the door has to be locked behind me, a friend walks me downstairs to make sure I get into the car safely, so he can then lock the door and go back to the party. We go downstairs. The car is there. I have a bad feeling as I approach it, but I tell myself, you've had a bit to drink and maybe taken some stuff. You're just being paranoid. You just need to go home and rest. I open the door, wave goodbye to my friend, greet the driver, and get into the vehicle. Once again, I have a very bad feeling. I want to be clear. I keep having this bad feeling the entire time. I tell myself, at least stay alert. If something happens, you'll see it coming. I had no idea how much I would need that intuition, or how tightly I would cling to it afterward. As soon as I'm in the car, the driver starts acting strange. He asks me,
"Is that your friend? Is that your boyfriend? Who is he? Why is he looking at me like that?"
He's talking about my friend, who is still standing at the door making sure the car leaves and that I'm safely inside. I answer the driver, slightly annoyed that it's my friend, that he has every right to be there, and that it's none of his business. Then he continues saying weird things while starting to drive. He asks me questions about my love life, whether I had a good night, if I drank a lot, if I had fun. I realize that this bad feeling is actually intuition, and that I'm probably going to end up in serious trouble if I don't get out of this car. Then I tell myself, okay, maybe he's just being annoying and he'll just drop you off and try to get your number, which unfortunately happens quite often. We keep driving. He's driving fast, he takes the wrong turns, and I notice that it's extremely hot in the car, and that the GPS sound is very loud, but I don't see any phone mounted anywhere. Most drivers have their phone mounted for the GPS, and the fact that I couldn't see it immediately unsettled me. Since it's unbearably hot, I ask him to open the window. I can't do it myself because the door is locked, and when I press the button to open the window, nothing happens. He refuses. He tells me he'll turn down the heat and that it should be fine. I insist. I tell him I need air, that it's way too hot, and that I need the window open. We go back and forth for a few seconds. Then he unlocks the door, and I can finally open the window. After that, he turns to me and says,
See? We're nice. I let you open the window.
I found that so strange and uncomfortable. I felt awful. My heart felt like it was going to jump out of my chest. I was thinking, that's it. I'm trapped. With all these warning signs, I eventually tell myself, at least check which direction he's going. And then my blood ran cold. We were going completely in the wrong direction, not toward my home at all. At that moment, I tell myself that if I panic, the trap will close in on me. I decide to wait for the next red light to try something. We reach a traffic light, and by sheer luck, it turns red. I ask him the question that changes everything. Hey, sorry, but why aren't we going the right way? He turns toward me, stares straight into my eyes, then slowly looks me up and down and up, and says the sentence that completely froze me, and that still terrifies me today. I get chills just writing it.
But the right way to where?
I didn't wait a second. I slammed the door open and ran. While running, I turn around and see him outside the car, which is still moving, screaming at the top of his lungs.
Come back. Why are you leaving?
His screams forever shattered the morning of January 1st, 2024. I kept running. I heard him start the engine. He deliberately screeched the tires to scare me. After that, everything happened very fast. He left. I called my friends to explain everything. They thought I was paranoid because they believed I was high and didn't know what I was talking about, even though I had just lived through hell. To this day, it hurts to think that what I went through was brushed aside when it remains one of my biggest traumas. Unfortunately, as I write this, it's not even the worst thing that has happened to me, but I can't talk about that yet. It took me a long time to be able to tell myself that I would share this story because it ruined my life. After that, I couldn't leave my home anymore. I couldn't communicate. I couldn't escape the hatred of others that was born that morning. I've had a pretty chaotic life. I always told myself that's just how it is. It's always been like this for you. Crazy things always happen to you. But even today, every time I get into an Uber, I'm afraid. I have never used the Bolt app again. I tried to file a complaint, but the police didn't really follow up on what I said in my pre-complaint. They told me they couldn't do anything and that I should contact Bolt. Bolt told me the exact same thing, that I needed to contact the police, so I gave up. I don't know whether the license plate was the right one or not because I didn't check. And today, I will never again make the mistake of getting into a car without checking the plate. I don't know what would have happened to me if I hadn't been able to open that door. Every day I think, thank God I insisted on opening that window. I believe that before that the door was locked, and if I hadn't insisted I wouldn't have been able to get out. No one knows what would have happened to me because that man clearly had no intention of taking me home. And he definitely didn't intend to play cards either. That was my story. Thank you to those who take the time to read it. I think it's important not to forget that taking Ubers can be very, very dangerous. Not always, but you have to be extremely careful. And avoid Bolt if possible, because they really don't have enough background checks for their drivers. Thank you, and please take care of yourselves. This happened to me a few years ago while I was still in college, but I've been watching a ton of those narrated true stories on YouTube and felt compelled to share my own experience. For some context, I'm Irish and was studying in the UK to get my bachelor's degree. I don't know how common this is elsewhere, but where I lived, it seemed to be common enough that landlords renting to students privately would convert the front downstairs room into an extra bedroom. This is where my bedroom was for my first year. I didn't mind it too much, but it was a bit weird having the front door directly in my room, and especially since, for those who aren't familiar with terraced houses in the UK, there isn't a front garden usually, and we just had a small section separating the front door from the path outside. By now, I'd been living here for a few months, and I could recognize the difference in the sound of someone walking past on the path, and the sound of someone stepping towards the front door. On the night that this happened, I was totally alone in the house, as both my housemates were away home for the weekend. This was a little unusual since neither of them usually went home, except for special occasions, but I think it might have been Valentine's Day around that time or something similar. It was about 1 in the morning, and I was lying in bed and on the phone to my boyfriend at the time, as we were long distance. As we're talking, I could hear some footsteps outside, and immediately recognized that it was someone right outside the door. I kept listening and could just hear them shuffling around a bit, and then they started fumbling with the door handle. That spooked me, and I told my boyfriend that I was going to have a quick look out the window to see if I could spot whoever it was. I get up and part the curtains, and quite literally pressed my face and hands against the window to get a look outside, since it was pitch black by now and the streetlights had been turned off. It took a second then for me to realize what I was looking at, but whoever it was who was outside was doing the exact same thing that I was, pressed up against the window and staring in at me inches away. I didn't scream. I just felt as if all the wind had been knocked out of me, and I remember feeling like someone had just dunked me into a pool of ice water. Whoever it was looked to be male. I couldn't see his face properly, but I just remember he was wearing a hoodie. He ran when he saw me, and after trying to collect myself, I quickly told my boyfriend and then rang the police. I don't remember how long it took for them to get there, but there wasn't a whole lot they could do. I think they might have done a quick patrol of the area, but nothing ever came of it. It was absolutely one of the most terrifying things that's happened to me, and I can't figure out at all why he was trying to break in. At the time, I had my light on, which would have been visible from the window, even with the curtains drawn, so I figured I could rule out that he was a junkie or squatter looking for a place to crash. I don't know if maybe he'd been watching me and my housemates for a while, seeing 3 girls living alone, and thought maybe this would make an easy burglary, or worse. But thank God I didn't have any trouble again afterwards. I couldn't sleep for days after. I remember staying up until the early morning, just watching movies on my laptop to feel less alone, until I eventually fell asleep from exhaustion once it started to get light outside. Since I was here from Ireland, I didn't even have any family members close by who I could call for or go and stay with, and it was the most agonizingly long weekend of my life waiting for my housemates to come back. I definitely think I've developed a slight phobia now of looking out the window while it's dark outside. This happened around 2016 and is still what I would call the scariest moment of my life. I was in my freshman year of university, and myself and a few friends decided it would be a lovely idea to travel just outside of the town to this view on a hill, which was a pretty popular spot for many students and locals. We were even more excited to hotbox our friend's car, get super stoned, and watch the sunset. For some context, I live in a pretty dangerous country where you do have to be pretty aware of your surroundings at all times. Even though it is a student town, it still had its fair share of robberies, muggings, and even the occasional act of violence, stabbing, or even murder. You do, however, get used to it once you're an adult, and if you have never experienced crime or true fear, you naively go around never expecting something sinister. The spot we went to did have its fair share of muggings and scares over the years for some, but we didn't even think twice. We pulled up when the sun still had about 30 to 45 minutes of visibility and began the smoking session. Everything was going well, and we were cracking jokes and very happy with just getting through an intense week. I noticed no other cars around us and was pretty happy about it, as I didn't really feel comfortable smoking and hotboxing a car in the presence of others. After gazing at the beautiful sun and talking to my best friend, I turned my head to the right to look out the passenger window, and that's when I saw them. 4 men, torn up outfits, crouched in the bushes no more than 20 feet away, staring and waiting like lions with their prey, just hoping for us to open those doors and get out the car. What was even more terrifying was how focused they all seemed on us. I immediately shouted to my friend who was driving, "There's guys in the bushes waiting for us. Drive!" He accelerated and drove off without a second's hesitation, and when we were no more than 50 meters down the dirt road, I looked back and saw two men walking onto the road just staring as we jetted off. Of course, we were all quite shaken up when we got back home and were just so grateful we never left the car and noticed them when we did. Best case scenario was that they were going to mug us. I still to this day try to avoid thinking about the worst case and even recounted it to one of the friends who was there that day, and he agrees that those men had evil intentions. By the looks on their face and the reputation of gangsters and desperate people in our country. So, to the four men who are waiting for us, let's not meet again. This happened back in 2015 or 2016 when my ex-boyfriend and I went camping in Mendocino, California. A few sites over was this tiny green one-person tent, the kind that barely fits a body. What struck me right away was how empty the site looked. No cooler, no chair, no lantern, no shoes outside. Just the little tent, zipped up tight. We went to bed, and sometime after 10 p.m. it started. Laughter. Not a group around a fire, not drunk campers, and definitely not an animal. I know what barred owls and coyotes sound like. This was human laughter. At first I thought it was maybe a radio or a Bluetooth speaker, but it never stopped, not once. All night long until sunrise. Same tone, same rhythm, no pauses for breath. Too steady, too repetitive to be a person in psychosis or on drugs. It sounded mechanical, like a loop. That's what makes it worse. Because if it wasn't someone actually laughing, then it was someone who had recorded laughter beforehand and brought it out into the woods to sit in that tiny tent in the dark and listen to it for hours. When we woke up around 6:30 to 7 a.m., the laughter was still going. We packed up fast and left without ever seeing who or what was inside. And even now, years later, I can't shake the thought that someone actually decided that was how they wanted to spend the night. A tent, a recording of endless laughter, and the silence of the woods around them. When I was around 22 years old, I had a scary encounter while staying at a hotel for a job. Around 2010, I was working for a traveling photography group that took church directory photos. Each photographer drove separately from all over the place, so I was in Harlan, Aya at the time. I was staying at a hotel along with other photographers who joined with me. I believe there was 4 of us, 2 guys, a girl, and myself. One morning, I went down to breakfast and was watching the TV in the hotel breakfast area. Someone was also down there, nearby, a guy. When he looked at me, I said good morning, as I do wherever I go, just to be friendly. He said it back, and we had just a polite exchange. Something you would do with a stranger you never thought you would see again. He mentioned he was staying there with his team for a construction job. I go to leave and I say something very casual, like, "Have a good one, see you later." He said something like, "We could hang later." I didn't think anything of it and just brushed it off like, yeah, maybe. I don't remember if it was the same day or not, but as I didn't work until 11 a.m., we tend to work from like 11 a.m. to 10 p.m., give or take, depending on size of the church. At ETC, I decided to go take a nap since I didn't sleep well the night before. While laying in my room, I kept receiving phone calls to my room phone. I wasn't used to getting calls like that ever, so I just picked up. I would say hello, but nobody would answer. After a few times, I eventually just took the receiver off and placed it beside the phone so it would stop ringing. When it was time to get up and leave, I left my room and saw the guy was there in the hall. I waved casually, still not thinking anything of it. He asked where I was going, and I said I had to go to work. My friend showed up, a female photographer, and I went with her to her car as I was going to ride with her to the church. I told her about getting strange phone calls, and she mentioned she did as well. Later that night, there was a thunderstorm. My photographer group and I stood by the hotel lobby door watching the lightning. It was thundering and extremely dark. There were chances for tornadoes, so we were keeping tabs with each other. Eventually, I go to my room for the night and I hear a knock on my door. I didn't really want to answer it. However, I did, cracking the door to see who it was. It was the guy. He talked about how I said we could hang out, and I told him I was too tired after working all day and I needed to sleep. I shut the door. Now, I can't remember if this was the next morning or still night, but I recall him knocking again, but I wouldn't answer. I pretended to either be out or sleeping. I called my mom and started talking to her. I told her what was happening, and although I was scared, I almost acted like I wasn't when speaking with her. Suddenly, I had a weird feeling. I whispered to my mom, "Mom, hold on a second, I need to check something." I tiptoe as quietly over to my room door as possible. I look out the peephole, and I see him. I then see him turn his head to my door as if he was listening for something. My heart started to race. I then saw him move to the side. You know how the wall sometimes goes in for the doors, so there is like an indentation in the hallway for each room. Well, he goes to the wall, away from the room that juts out. I think he thought he was hiding because he would try to lean his head around the corner of the jut-out portion, as if listening for something. I walk to the furthest side of my room quietly and whisper to my mom about how I'm scared. I called the front desk to complain like my mom suggested. I can't remember if I also texted my friend or called her, but she also complained to the front desk about the various phone calls she received. Eventually, we were given new rooms, and the construction group manager was told by the hotel about one of his guys, and that creepy guy was told to stay away from us. I even told some of the church people about the situation, and they all said if we needed to stay with them, we could. All very nice, but still all strangers to me, and I didn't trust anyone at that point. I'm not sure what happened to him, as I didn't see him after that. I was a little jealous of my friend because she ended up with a hot tub in her room and I didn't, but it was fine. However, after that, I was more aware and careful with who I talked to and what I said. This happened 2 days ago, and I'm still very shaken up about it. I was with my brother and father. We were just at the immigration department in Hong Kong to sort something out for us. In further context, I'm 20F, and I'm not a Hong Kong local. It was getting late, and my dad suggested we start taking the bus back now to eat closer to the apartment area, or most good places would be closed by then. Midway, there was a stop that my brother suggested we get off and find food. We all agreed. I started to desperately need the toilet, and so my brother pointed at the closest McDonald's we could see. Big mistake. We go in, my brother and dad are waiting downstairs. I was under the assumption that, well, if there's no toilet downstairs, then there should be one up. If not, I'll leave and find another place. I walk up the stairs and look around, somewhat pacing as I desperately need to pee. The McDonald's worker seems to have spotted me and was looking at me, almost expecting me to bother him. I asked him if there's a toilet. He said,
Toilet? Through the door? Turn left and take a lift up.
It's an ominous brown door with no signs or anything at the front. He's the worker, so I assume he knows better than me. I open it, and what the fuck? It's very dark and run down, completely different vibe to the modern McDonald's. Extremely quiet. As soon as the door closed, it was almost soundproofed. All the bustling loud noises in the McDonald's had completely stopped. The room was just very dark with minimal white light. There were multiple doors that appeared locked in the building. I didn't explore much as I thought it was maybe a staff room. I turned the left corner as instructed, and there was indeed a lift. I assume maybe this is just a very odd passage to a shopping mall, which isn't too uncommon in Hong Kong, and surely how bad can this be if there is a lift? I press the lift and step in. Suddenly I hear the door open and the worker that directed me goes into the lift with me as well. I notice he's holding a black bin bag that is filled with little to nothing. I assumed, oh okay, maybe he needs to put this out and help me find the toilet. Kill two birds with one stone. I ask him what floor do I press, and he presses the second floor. Once the door closes, it's a bit quiet and awkward. I glance at him for a second. He was wearing a COVID face mask, one eye looking forwards, and he had a lazy eye looking to the side. Suddenly he says,
Lang ho lang.
which translates to "you're very pretty" in Cantonese. At this point, it's very awkward, and I just said a quiet thank you to not aggregate him. I'm wagering if I actually need to pee this badly now. The lift stops. Finally. I was fully expecting a shopping mall when the lift doors opened. That was not the case. The doors opened and it was just a dark, quiet, very run-down, narrow hallway of doors. It was so dark with infinite corners. Not a single person was there but us. I couldn't tell what the building was. An odd cross of abandoned apartment building doors and office doors. At this point, we're both still stood in the lift, and my entire body is in a fight-or-flight response as this whole situation was making me fear the worst. The worker gestures me to get off at this lift and almost wants to continue walking me to the toilet. I quickly make an excuse of, "I've bothered you so much already from your work. You can just point at the direction and I'll find it, promise." He points to the right and tells me to go through there, and that's the toilet. I thank him and then go the complete opposite direction he told me. The whole place was like a fucking maze, narrow hallway with doors. I got curious and pushed at one of them, and it was locked. At this point, I'm really trying to stall enough time to appear. I went to the toilet before getting the lift back down. I get a call from my brother now. A very angry call, asking why I've taken so long and where am I. I explain I don't know where I am, I'm trying to find my way back. I hang up, and I'm getting increasingly more scared as the place is giant. As I mentioned, like an abandoned office apartment. Hallways with no signs or anything while being extremely dark with minimal light. The walls were all torn down, it's just so quiet and run down, there was no way a functioning toilet was up here. I'm really panicking now and trying to find my way back to the lift, scared shitless. My initial discomfort of desperately needing to pee turned to desperately wanting to leave. I calmed myself down a bit with breathing exercises and tried to recollect the steps I took. Finally found the lift and quickly pressed back down. I pressed the close button so much. The lift takes me back down to the hallway, but by accident I walk forwards instead of turning right. What the fuck? There are more doors, 4 to 5 doors next to each other, but what was the most strange was the fact the doors were all facing this large glass panel wall between the McDonald's. I was able to look at the McDonald's and people eating, but they didn't notice I was there at all. I walked back and turned right this time, through the door. I was finally in the McDonald's again, but that glass wall on my end appeared to be a large mirror in the McDonald's. It was a double mirror. I looked around and there was no sight of the McDonald's worker either. I quickly walk back down the McDonald's. I see my dad and brother. My dad asked if I was okay as I looked really pale. I said I'll tell him when we're out. I asked him if he saw the worker again when they were waiting, describing him as a man with a mask on and a lazy eye. My dad shook his head and said he didn't see any worker when he checked upstairs for me earlier. My heart dropped as soon as I heard that. The worker was still up the lift. My dad also said, "Don't tell me you went through that lift." I opened that door and walked through a bit to find you. It was scary. Why were there so many doors and that glass? I thought there was something wrong, got out immediately. Bear in mind, my dad is a built-as-fuck man himself. He then sent my brother up to go look for me, not sure why. My brother is pretty skinny and unathletic in comparison. He opened the brown door just to see, and noped the fuck out. He described it as looking like a big dark back rooms with the doors next to each other back to back. He did not want to walk in there to explore. I will never go to the toilets alone again, and seeing a McDonald's will forever hold this memory for me. Edit. Found out recently. Apparently, they devised a plan that my dad was going to go through every level through the brown door to start, kicking down doors and shouting my name. He had a very bad feeling. If he wasn't back down or back down with me within 15 minutes, my brother was instructed to call the police. My brother disagreed with the plan, suggesting it'll be best if they find all the exits and guard them now, banking on the fact I'll be out at some point, as it's unlikely they'll find me through every level in that lift and doors. I asked what would happen if I didn't come out through the exits, and he said, "At least we'll find your remains." Morbid. I'm not sure if this is the right place to post a story like this, so please excuse my formatting and the length of this post, as I'm pretty new to Reddit. A few years ago, probably now 10 years, my mother and my stepfather bought a house in southern Europe. It was a bargain back then, as prices weren't skyrocketing like they are nowadays. The house was built sometime in the 1950s. It originally belonged to our current neighbor. Her parents built it after the war. They later built a new house right next to it and are still living there. She and her husband are now both over 70 and very kind people. Neither my mother nor my stepfather knew anything about the house's history when they bought it. I guess they just wanted to start a new chapter in their lives. It was a tough time back then because we were basically living in a construction site while they renovated a lot of things themselves. We found a few relics in the house, an old sewing machine and some old war postcards that were hidden beneath the basement floor, but nothing too unusual at first. The property has 2 buildings, the main house with a basement, and a smaller second building. We later found out that the second building used to be a goat stable. During renovations, they needed to remove the floor there, so they had to dig into the ground. We were pretty new in town at the time, and if you've ever lived in a very small community, you know how interested people are in newcomers. I'm sure we were the main topic of conversation back then, especially after what we found. While digging, we uncovered several animal remains. If I remember correctly, the first thing we found was a goat's pelvic bone, or maybe part of a spine. It's been so many years that I don't remember exactly. But then we found something much more disturbing. The top part of a human skull. It was very clear that it was real. You could see the cranial sutures, the seams where a human skull fuses together as it grows. My mom and stepfather didn't know what to do at first. We had just found what was clearly a human bone buried in the stable. I pushed my mom to call the police, and she did. Several police cars arrived, along with the local town doctor, who came to examine the bone. You can imagine how many neighbors showed up to see what was going on. The doctor and the police confirmed that it was indeed part of a real human skull. They asked if we had found anything else besides this and the goat bones, but we hadn't. Strangely, they brushed it off as something a previous tenant might have left there. As quickly as they arrived, they left. They didn't even take the bone with them. They told us it was up to us what to do with it. A few days later, we talked more with the neighbors who had previously owned the house. At first, they were very happy that we bought it, since we seemed like a normal family finally bringing some life back into the place. But my mom wanted to know more about the house's history, so they told us what they knew. Some years before we moved in, they had rented the place out before eventually selling it. The first tenants were, according to them, a very troubled family. They had a daughter who was well known in town. I don't know how much of this is actually true, but the neighbors claimed they were running some kind of brothel involving their daughter. I have no idea how long this supposedly went on or how many guests there were. Her room was still in its original condition when we moved in. There were satanic symbols painted on the walls in strange writings. Unfortunately, I don't have any pictures of the skull, bones, or the writing. This family had a very bad reputation in town, and people were relieved when they moved away. After them, a psychologist moved in. She lived there alone. Our neighbor told us she displayed animal skeletons around the property and even left them hanging on the outer walls to dry. They described her as very strange or eccentric. As you can imagine, she also had a bad reputation in town. I had never seen or heard of someone openly drying animal skeletons where everyone could see them. As all of this unfolded, I couldn't help but look up the psychologist online. As far as I could find, she is still practicing today. To this day, we never found out why that human skull fragment was buried in the stable, or how it got there in the first place. My mom once suggested that maybe the psychologist had ordered it from a university for study purposes, but we'll probably never know. This happened about 10 years ago. I was 11 at the time. Every now and then I still think about it because it's just so strange. I still don't know where someone could even order something like that or why you would bury it in such a random place. I just wanted to share this story here. Maybe someone has an idea why someone would bury something like this, and where a person could even obtain a human skull fragment. I guess it's just my curiosity. Edit. Also, maybe it's a good idea to mention the skull fragment was cleanly cut. like it was made with some sort of bone cutter. I think everyone has seen a movie where the top part is missing and the brain is visible, kind of cut like such a scene. I found a complete real skull for ordering in Switzerland. The top part is also cut like this one. The only difference are the screws that hold the skull together, which were missing on the thing we found. This happened literally yesterday, and I honestly don't think I've fully processed it yet. Me female, 19, and my friend female, 19, were biking home at around 3 a.m. on a dimly lit street right next to our house. On one side was forest, pitch black beyond the tree line, and on the other side were a bunch of houses. From far away we spotted a red car with one broken headlight parked ahead. As soon as we got closer, the car started moving, passed us very slowly, then made a U-turn and drove past us again. Even in the dark, it was obvious we were two girls alone at night, so we put some space between us and them. As soon as we got to the sidewalk, we noticed a girl standing partially hidden behind a white truck, watching that same red car. The car was creeping towards her. Then she ran off, running up the sidewalk and turning into a bike path that cuts through the forest. Immediately, two men got out the car and followed her in. So we decided to follow and try to help that girl. Survival instincts hadn't kicked in yet. I live next to that forest. I know how dark it gets. No one walks that path without a flashlight unless they have a reason, and even then, it was 3 in the morning. The slow footsteps, the bucket hat guy, the way the car disappeared, it all just felt wrong. We reached the path entrance and saw the red car just waiting there. The driver, a guy in a white bucket hat, looked straight at us, then sped away far into the street. The path was pitch black we walked in. Fence on one side, dense forest on the other. That's when I noticed its slow, deliberate footsteps keeping pace with us, definitely not an animal, and heavy enough to be a person. We kept walking on until my friend spotted the girl ahead of us. She shined her flash and called out, "Hey, are you okay?" The girl looked over her shoulder, stared for a moment with this unreadable, creepy expression, and then took off, running deeper into the darkness. At that point, our survival instincts finally kicked in. We turned and sprinted back the way we came, screaming as we ran. We called the police as soon as we got back to the street. Within minutes, 3 police cars arrived. They asked questions, and one ghost car drove down the forest path. About 5 minutes later, they returned and showed us a photo of the girl. The cops said they found her with one man, which made no sense, because less than 10 minutes earlier we'd seen her completely alone and running away. They also said neither of them would identify themselves or explain why they were there. They brushed us off, saying we could go home now. As we walked away, we saw 3 people get into a police car, which made it even weirder because earlier they said there was only one guy with her. So was there really someone following us in the woods? I keep thinking, what if this was trafficking bait? Maybe the only reason they didn't go after us was because we started screaming. Either way, I can't stop replaying it in my head. A few years ago, I was solo traveling in South Korea after finishing a semester abroad in Japan. I was 21, still pretty naive and carefree. My friends had already flown home, so I figured I'd explore Seoul on my own for a few days, before heading back to Japan, and then home. I booked a hostel in Gangnam, a safe neighborhood, which had good reviews, but I made one big mistake. I booked a mixed dorm. I thought mixed meant a blend of people, but when I got there, it was just me, sharing a room with 5 men. I told myself it was fine, I was just there to sleep. Most people in hostels are chill anyway, right? For the most part, that turned out to be true. I even went out for dinner with 2 of the guys staying there, and they were really nice. But one of them gave me weird vibes from the very beginning. Something about him just felt off. I tried to brush it off, thinking that maybe he was just awkward or shy. I didn't want to judge too quickly, so I stayed friendly but kept my distance. Still, the red flags kept stacking up. Every morning when I got ready and did my makeup at the little vanity table, he would just stand behind me, staring silently through the mirror, not saying anything, just watching me. When I asked if he needed something, he'd always say no and keep watching until I got visibly uncomfortable and irritated. He also kept asking me when I planned to shower, even though we had shared but separate bathrooms with stalls. No reason he should be concerned about my schedule. He'd always ask what I was doing each day and wanted to hang out constantly. I politely declined every time. Then one day I randomly ran into him at a subway station nowhere near the hostel. I had just visited Deoxagung Palace, and when I was about to head back, there he was. I played it off, but it made me uneasy because what were the odds? I kept telling myself I was just being paranoid. I didn't want to cause drama, and honestly, I was still dumb and trusting back then. But my last morning was the last straw for me. I woke up early, still half asleep, and drifted back to sleep. The next time I opened my eyes, he was sitting by my bedside, leaning over me, stroking my face and my shoulder. I shot up immediately and was like, "What the hell are you doing?" He didn't give me a real answer, but just mumbled something vague. I felt sick to my stomach. I got up, packed my things, and told him I was checking out. He kept following me around the room, trying to make conversation like nothing had happened. I dropped the friendly act completely and started snapping at him, asking if he wasn't going to pack too, reminding him that his flight wasn't until way later. And then he said,
"I really like you."
I told him that was inappropriate considering we'd only known each other for 5 days. He replied,
"Sometimes you just know."
He kept saying he wanted to meet again, maybe in Europe someday. We were both European, and tried to get my number. I refused. He pushed. Eventually, I gave it to him just to get him to back off, knowing I'd block him anyway. Nothing technically happened, I guess, but I still felt disgusting, and I was furious at myself for being polite for so long. But at the same time, being too firm might have triggered something worse. He felt unpredictable. That was the first and last time I ever stayed in a mixed dorm. I've stayed in female-only dorms ever since, and I have never had an experience like that again, thankfully. Before I tell my story, I just want to say I'm aware of how dumb it is to do stuff like this, and I probably won't be doing this for a long, long time after what happened a few months ago. Anyway, I just really needed to post this because I don't know who else to tell. About half a year ago, I had the scariest experience of my life. For context, I'm a dumb teenage boy who sneaks out every now and then just to walk around at night. I find something very peaceful walking around after dark, but my parents have never let me stay out past sunset. So for about a year, whenever school gets hard, or just life in general gets stressful, I sneak out and just walk around for about 2 hours or so. Anyway, the night I'm talking about began with me deciding to go for another 2 a.m. ritual. I grabbed a sweatshirt, got on my shoes once I was outside, and hopped the fence to freedom. After I was safely away from my neighborhood, I took one of my usual routes, which is cutting through another neighborhood and walking onto a winding road, where I then walk down the middle of it and head towards a circle of shops and fast food restaurants. I was probably there for a solid chunk of time, just walking in the loop and ending up sitting on a bench. At some point, I picked up a plastic spoon on the ground and started to grind it against the pavement until the spoon part was half gone out of boredom. This is important later. I was chillin' there for a bit before I decided to walk around a bit more, and I eventually ended up at a park like 10 minutes away from my neighborhood, where I usually end off the night just staring off into the sky. The park itself creeps me out sometimes because at night there's a huge ring of trees surrounding all sides of you, and anyone could watch from the woods. Anyway, shit starts to get real here because I'm staring up into existence feeling like a philosopher. Well, I'm laying on one of those table benches when I hear an old man whistle. I probably shot up because I had never had another human interaction on these walks, and I see this old man dimly illuminated by a streetlight by the only entrance of the park. I had seen him before. He's this tall, skinny white guy that walks around our town all day, and I would honestly think he was homeless if he wasn't wearing the same fancy button-up and cargo pants every day. Me and my mom have talked about him, and we think he's mentally disabled and probably lives with a caretaker. I had an interaction with him once. About a year ago, I was walking home in broad daylight when I passed the man who was at that time sitting on a bench. Dude just looks at me and says,
"Jesus loves you."
with a weird little smirk on his face. I responded with an awkward, I know, even though I'm an atheist and didn't really think much of it. Anyway, back to the park at night. I just stare at him in that empty parking lot probably way longer than I should have because he was already creeping me the hell out. I imagine we were staring at each other for a real long time before he slowly starts walking toward me, and at this point, I'm frozen in fear because why the fuck is this old white geezer out with me at like 3 a.m. in an empty park? I'm standing up at this point when he gets close to me and just gives me this cheeky grin like he knows something I don't yet, and I'm still just gawking at him like a fucking buffoon. Have you ever scoffed at a book or movie when the main character is frozen in fear? Well, I have, and I never will again because at this point I'm more frozen than I've ever been in my life. At some point, after probably like 10 seconds of awkward standing, he just kinda half pats and half grabs my shoulder and reaches into his pocket to pull out a plastic spoon. The same plastic spoon that I was holding about an hour ago at the shop plaza. He just kinda tucks it in my front sweatshirt pocket, and I guess something just makes my mind snap out of my frozen stance because I absolutely fucking book it to the public bathroom and lock the door. I'm now in this dimly lit bathroom in the middle of the night, and I'm guessing at this time it was past 3 in the morning. I assumed that maybe he would leave once he saw me in my state of panic, but honestly, I don't think he ever left. I ended up looking closer at the plastic spoon and it was altered. Have you seen that one viral AI-generated image where it looks completely normal at a glance, but you can't identify a single thing? If not, just search up, name one thing in this image. Now imagine that, except a word carved onto a plastic spoon, but you can't read it, or even identify any of the letters. I think I sat in that locked bathroom for over half an hour just contemplating every single decision I've made in the past year that lead up to the nightmare I was in at that moment. To be clear, I had no phone or any way of contacting someone because my parents installed Life 360 on my phone and they can see my location whenever. I also had no watch or access to the outside to tell the time. I ended up gaining the courage to unlock the door and just absolutely rocket myself towards the exit of the park. Before I turned the corner, I looked back for a second and saw a figure sitting on the bench that was right next to the bathroom. This senile old man had waited outside for an hour just to see me one more time. I'm being completely honest when I say I held a full sprint until I got to my neighborhood, where I caught my breath behind a bush and then snuck back in my house. I haven't gone out at night since that experience, and I don't know if I'll ever sneak out again. I still have the spoon buried somewhere in my wardrobe, but I haven't looked at it in months. Sometimes I think about how long he was following me, and if it was an isolated incident, or if he had been stalking me on other late-night trips. I would love to hear your guys' opinion on the matter, unless you're here to lecture me about my actions, because trust me, I've already learned. Anyway, creepy old man that was stalking me that night, let's not meet again.